Sorry. Hi everyone, Jai Hind and welcome to the platform of StudyIQ IS in English. My name is Bhanwar Singh. Today I'm XNTA 115th course and qualified civil services in 2012. And I welcome you once again on the platform of StudyIQ, and we'll be doing the complete the Hindu analysis, and we'll be seeing which all important articles are there which are important for our preparation. So if you are live, please type in the message and let me know that you're watching this session live along with me on the platform. So let's say if you're live and watching the session, and then we'll be moving ahead and we'll be doing the complete analysis for our today's session. All right, so let's see who is live right now with us. And today we'll be talking about which all important articles. Let's see. So we'll be talking about these articles in today's session. All right, these are the important articles that you will find in our today's The Hindu. That is, the first one is about the Pahalgam attack, where a supplementary charge sheet has been filed by the NIA. And that have charge sheeted the LET or Lashkar-e-Taiba, chief as well. So this is the first topic that we'll be discussing. Then we'll be talking about is the right to vote is a fundamental right. Now you will find this in the editorial section. This is the editorial that we are talking about, and ultimately this is again the second topic that we'll be picking up for today's analysis. Then we'll be talking about the census 2027, where it is about the pre-test of the caste enumeration that have started, which is the next topic. Then we'll be talking about the El Nino's threat to India's economy and also to the power sector as well. There are two different, articles. One is in the text and context, and the another article relates to the power sector as well. That how the El Nino, it will impact the power sector in India as well. All right, then we'll be talking about AI governance and the Global South's voice as well. Again, you will find this in the editorial section. This is again an editorial that we'll be discussing. Also, there is the question surrounding the Quad's future. Again, a very important article that you will find in our today's The Hindu. Then we'll be talking about Madhya Pradesh, which reconstitutes the Waqf board according to the new amendments which had been, they had been taken place. And ultimately, this is kind of the sub judice issue that we'll be talking about, where there was a case in 2025 as well in Supreme Court, and we'll be talking about that judgment as well, that what Supreme Court said in its 2025 order. Then we'll be moving ahead and we'll be talking about the ProTag technology. Again, very important because the FDA, it has approved the VEP Digestrant, and ultimately this is where you will find this in the science and technology column. So these are the important articles that we'll be discussing for today's complete The Hindu analysis. All right, now these are the quotes that you will find in today's, for the today's session. Just give me a second. All right, let me. All right. So these are the quotes that are there. Again, when it comes to the editorial, you will find there is a complete piece of editorial that is there in today's The Hindu that had been written by S.Y. Qureshi, who is former Chief Election Commissioner. Ultimately, he says that the vote is the very instrument through which the popular sovereignty is exercised. And then the another one is also related to the same, that is the ballot is stronger than the bullet, but the constitutional framework that secures it is the bedrock of the republic itself. So these are the two quotes that you can use while you are writing the answers to your mains framework. Now coming to the quote that we, the word that we have for today. So the word that is mentioned in the Hindu, it is appetence. So appetence is basically, it comes from the appetite. All right, so appetence is a feeling of craving something. And ultimately, it is about yearning, urge or drive as well. The team's appetence for success was obvious. That is the usage that you will find. Now coming to the first news, but before moving ahead and discussing the first news that we have for today's The Hindu analysis, let me tell you that today we are starting off with the batch for the GS Foundation, that is Resolution P2I batch. Now this batch is in English based upon the SMART model, where you get the structured classes, you get the mentorship, you get the assessment dashboard, and even the revision and the test series. And you can enroll into this batch by using the code that is BRS Live. That is the code that you can use. Now over here, the first news that you will find in our today's The Hindu on the front column or the front page itself. We have the first page that is of the advertisement in the Delhi edition, but when it comes to the main page, so the front page, there is the news that is about the Pahalgam attack, where the NIA has filed the supplementary charge sheet. Now over here, this is very important because ultimately here, they have charge sheeted against Hafiz Saeed. Now, Hafiz Saeed is the Lashkar-e-Taiba chief and also named the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Resistance Front, that is the TRF, as the legal entities for the 22nd April 2025 Pahalgaon attack that occurred, and ultimately that killed 26 of the civilians as well. Now, these charges, they had been invoked under the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 and Unlawful Activities Prevention Act of 1967 as well. That includes the charges of waging the war against India as well. Good morning, Political Science, and Kundan, good morning. Now, over here, this complete supplementary charge sheet, it builds on the original charge sheet that was filed in 2025 on 15th of December, which is 1,597 paged charge sheet. And over here, it had named the handler, that is Sajid Jatt, as well as the 3 terrorists which were killed in the Operation Mahadev that was launched in July 2025. Now here, the NIA have cited that there had been the meticulous scientific investigation which were done by the NIA and that have established the cross-border conspiracy as well as the logistic support from the local civilians as well. Yes. So over here, it is very important that when it comes to Lashkar-e-Taiba, so Lashkar-e-Taiba is the UN and even the India designated terrorist organization which is based in Pakistan. And here it is the TRF, that is its deniability proxy that had claimed the Pahalgaon terror attack that was done. Alright, at the same time, NIA was created. When it comes to the NIA, this was created after we had the Mumbai attack, in 2008. So this was after the attack that we have the National Investigation Agency Act that was created in 2008. And ultimately, it is India's central counter-terror investigation agency, which has the suo motu powers pan-India jurisdiction as well. Suo motu, that means it can take actions without any formal application that has been given to it. Also, when it comes to the UAPA, so UAPA is very important because this act is the Preventive Detention Act that was passed in 1967. And ultimately, it was amended in 2019. It allows the designation of the individuals as well and not just the organizations as the terrorist. And we have the BNS or Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, which has actually, yes, prima facie, or prima facie is different. Suo motu is different, prima facie is different over here. Kundan, when it comes to prima facie is basically on the first hand. That is just by going through it, you see that there is the substance that is there. That is prima facie. But suo motu is actually, it is about, taking the cognizance without any approval. Or, you can say that suo motu is where the agency, it does not require any of the, permission to handle the counter-terrorism cases. So that is the difference between suo motu and the prima facie. Yes, suo motu is on its own. So over here, when it comes to Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita as well. So Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita have replaced the IPC and it carries the waging war offense. It was also earlier that was provided under the IPC as well. Alright, in IPC we had the section 121, but now we have section 147 of the BNS or Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita that actually has the offense of waging war against the, against the country or against India. Now, we have the post-2611 architecture which had been created for the counter-terrorism, where we have NIA, we have the NatGrid, we have the multi-agency center as well. They were built precisely to prosecute the state-sponsored proxy terrorism in India. Now, this article is very important because ultimately over here you will find that how the complete terrorism or the terrorist network they function. So this is the complete terror ecosystem where we have the kinetic attackers. Now, these kinetic attackers are basically those which are foot soldiers and ultimately they enter into India and then they wage the act of the terrorism. At the same time, we have the overground workers as well. Now, these overground workers are basically the civilian logistics and the financiers which are present. Then we have the proxy organizations like, for example, we have TRF, which have acted as the front for the Lashkar-e-Taiba, and then we have the state sponsor or the handlers, which are basically located across the border. All right, so this is the complete terror, framework that you will find, and ultimately it is about neutralizing the legal entities and overground workers that break the ecosystem that ultimately destroys the deniability and the logistics as well. Now, this complete news is quite important because this portrays to the various dimensions where you can relate this to. Like, for example, this reinforces India's diplomatic case as well, that Pakistan is basically sponsoring the cross-border terrorism ahead of any FATF or the multilateral engagement. Now, there is also the domestic political consensus that you will find over here. That is, the parties, the political parties which are there, they are basically united on the front of the zero tolerance to the terror. And this is a near total, where it is unlikely because ultimately when it comes to the political parties, they have their different agendas. But when it comes to terrorism, we find a kind of unity or solidarity among the political parties as well. Also, when it comes to the economic perspective, you can see that the security operation and the litigation, they impose the fiscal cost over the state exchequer. That is, there is the cost that is ultimately there because of the litigation charges, because of the operations which are conducted. And when it comes to the Pahalgam terror attack, there were the news reports which have said that the tourism in the Kashmir, especially in the Pahalgam, that have taken a direct hit after the attack. Now, there are also long trials that actually strain the judicial as well as investigative resources. Also, the conviction rate is quite a concern over here because when it comes to the terror cases, so the conviction case, it remains a governance concern. And this is again a major concern that is there related to the terrorism cases which are there or the cases which had been filed under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act in India. Now, over here, this also relates to the social dimension because ultimately the attack on the targeted civilians that was on the communal lines that was done. And this is, this has tested the social cohesion in the valley. Now, there are also local support networks which are present. So ultimately, they had been named as civilians in the charge sheet, but also this actually revealed that there is a radicalization risk that is present in the Kashmir Valley. And again, this is a major concern because we have seen when it comes to when it comes to the civilians or the locals, citizens which are present over there, if they are supporting the terror network, so that is a major concern, and the government, it should look after it. Also, there are victim families which actually long wait for the justice. That raises the question of on the right to speedy trial which is there. Now, when it comes to the ethical perspective, so there is a tension that is between the due process, that is presumption of the innocence and the fair trial, as compared to the political urgency to name the individuals or the organizations quickly. So this raises the ethical concern as well, and it is the ethical duty of the state to protect the witnesses, the civilians who cooperate with the investigation, despite that there is the risk of the retaliation as well, and that is the ethical point of view of the complete issue. So over here, you can find the question that can relate to NIA, it can relate to UAPA as well. And also you can find the question that could be related to NatGrid and the other terror framework that we have or, counter-terror framework that we have. Right now, Amar Yatra is fully protected under Army. Yes. So over here, you can find this question that is, consider the following statement about NIA. It was constituted under NIA Act of 2008, enacted after 26/11 Mumbai attack. Then it can investigate scheduled offences anywhere in India without prior state consent. And only individuals, not organizations, can be charge sheeted as the accused under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. So over here, how many of the statements that are given above, they are correct? So when answering these type of questions, always remember that what we are studying over here, that is quite fruitful. And you will find such kind of questions in your prelims in 2027 itself. So here we have the third of the statement that is incorrect that we have just studied, and thereby we have only 1 and 2 which are correct. Therefore, we have the answer that is only 2 of the statements, they are true. All right. Now, in the mains also, in mains 2026, you can find the question from this particular framework, and that is discuss the legal and institutional mechanism available for India for prosecuting cross-border state-sponsored terrorism, examine their effectiveness with reference to the recent case. Because ultimately this relates to the internal security perspective that we are talking about. So you can start with the intro where you can define the proxy terrorism that is there. Also, you can cite the Pahalgam and the NIA charge sheet as the current data point. Then you can move to the body where you can discuss about the legal perspective, that is the NIA Act, the UAPA and the BNS. Then you can talk about the institutional framework that we have. We have MAC, NetGrid and the international cooperation. But also in the body, you should talk about the challenges as well. That is the evidences across border, the trial delays and the witness safety also. And then while you are concluding, it is very important that you have to shift towards the administrative lens. That is quite important. So you have to conclude, and the conclusion is that we should have faster special courts, there should be victim compensation, diplomatic isolation of the sponsored states. That should be the way forward, or it should be what you should write in your conclusion. Now, coming to the next news that we have, it is about the right to vote, and this is our editorial that we are talking about, which had been written by the former Chief Election Commissioner. Now, over here, this complete article actually, it revives the debate that is voting is a fundamental right, or it is merely a statutory right that is provided under the Representation of People Act that we have for India. Now, this is very important because when it comes to Supreme Court, so Supreme Court have time and again in various cases, like we have Punnu Swami case in 1952. Also, we have the Jyoti Basu case that was there in 1982. And even we had Kuldip Nayyar case in 2006. So ultimately, Supreme Court have held that actually voting is not the fundamental right, or it is not the part of Part 3 of the Constitution, but it is actually a statutory right that had been provided. That was the stance that the Supreme Court had taken. But also when it comes to the newer rulings, so you will see that the newer rulings, they have actually constitutionalized the facets of voting. Like for example, we had the right to know the candidate antecedents, where the candidates, they have to furnish their details about their prior, conviction, their, complete, the liabilities and the assets as well. They have to furnish this detail, and that was laid down by the act, or you can say the Supreme Court judgment, that was ADR judgment in the 2002. Then there was also the nota that was provided, that is none of the above, in 2013 under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution. So over here, it is very important that when it comes to this complete editorial piece, so you will see that it is about a paradox. It is about a paradox where it is the right to reject all the candidates, which is actually a constitutional right, which had been protected by the nota that was given in 2013. But at the same time, when it comes to the right to choose one, that is not a constitutional right. So over here, this is very important because this is the paradox that this complete article it talks about. Now over here, we have Article 326 that it relates to, that actually gives us the right to vote, where it is the universal adult suffrage that we get for choosing the members of parliament which are there in the Lok Sabha and even for the state legislative assembly. And this is a constitutional guarantee of who may be an elector, or actually it provides us with the right to vote. Also, there is Part 3 of the that is given in the Constitution, that is basically the fundamental rights, which actually does not enumerate the right to vote as the fundamental right. Now, Parliament actually, it is regulating this through the ordinary legislation. Like for example, we have the Representation of People Act 1950 and 1951 as well. Now, this also relates to the basic structure doctrine that was laid down in the Keshwanand Bharati case, which holds that democracy is inviolable. There was a case, that is Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan, that was there in 1975, where the Supreme Court have held that the free and fair elections, they are essential to the democracy. And ultimately, this article, or this the complete news piece that is there, editorial piece, it connects to the electoral reforms. It connects to Article 19(1)(a), that is the freedom of speech and expression, and even the basic structure jurisprudence as well. So this is again very important because ultimately when it comes to the constitutional rights or the fundamental rights, so there are two different types of rights that are provided. We have fundamental right, which are basically under the Part 3 of the Constitution, or they are under Part 3 of the Constitution, and they are basic rights which are given or provided so that the human rights, they could be valued. Then we have the statutory rights which are created through the separate laws. We have laws which are created or which creates these rights. Like for example, we have RTI, that is the right to information. It is also a statutory right. Now the problem is over here, what happens is that ultimately the legal remedy when it comes to the fundamental right, you get the writs. Now these writs, they could be used for the Supreme Court or the High Court. For the Supreme Court, we have Article 32, and for the High Court, we have Article 226. But when it comes to the statutory rights, there are the legal remedies which are available. Now, major problem is that when it comes to the fundamental right, so over here, there is, ultimately the parliament, it has to amend it through the majority. All right, that is ultimately, there is a special majority that is required if there is amendment of any of the major part of the part 3 of the constitution. But at the same time, when it comes to the statutory rights, so they could be easily amended by the parliament with a simple majority, and that is the major problem when it comes to the statutory rights which are provided. All right. Conflating digital dissent with waging war, section 147 of BNS falls. The proportionality fails the proportionality test. This is a direct overreach under Article 19(2). Right. Now, over here, we have the, when it comes to this news, so actually it pertains to political, social, and the ethical perspective, because ultimately when it comes to the, political perspective over here, you will find that this actually determines how the parliament is, or it can restrict the voting as well, because this is the right that has been provided to the parliament, and the parliament can amend the disqualification, it can amend the residency rules, and this is a statutory right which is basically more amendable than the fundamental rights which are there. Now, this actually also feeds into the larger disputes that are there, because ultimately there is a news that you will find on the front page of the Hindu itself that leads to the Malkangiri, the deletions that had been done in the SIR. So ultimately, there is the dispute that we are talking about related to the SIR of the electoral rolls and also the mass deletions which had been seen in Odisha or in Karnataka this week. So this relates to that particular issue as well. Over here, it is also important that the marginalized groups, like for example, we have migrants, we have the urban poor or the tribal population, they face the risk of or higher risk of the exclusion when voting is treated as mere statutory privilege which is subject to the procedural rigidity as well. Now, the SIR or the special intensive revision, the related deletions has been there. Like, for example, in Malkangiri, in Odisha, there is nearly 11% of the voters which had been deleted. Now, this actually relates to the, the vulnerable or the migrant origin population, which are actually hit disproportionately, and thereby this is a social dimension as well. In Andhra Pradesh, YouTuber had been booked under the UAPA Act. Yes, that's true. All right. At the same time, it also raises the ethical question. Now, the ethical question is that whether a democracy can claim the legitimacy while there is or it is treating its foundational act that is voting as revocable. So basically, this is about who has the sovereignty in India or in democracy, because democracy survives on the popular sovereignty. That is the sovereignty or the supreme power of the citizens that is there. Also, it is about the parliamentary sovereignty. So ultimately, there is the tension that we are talking about, that is parliament is sovereign or it is the popular or the people of the country that are sovereign, and thereby it is a ethical basis of the authority that we are talking about, and there this particular issue it relates to. All right, so again, important article that is there in our today's The Hindu in the editorial section. Now coming to the next is about the test run for the second phase of the census of India, where it is the pre-test of the census 2027 phase 2 that has begun in the 16 of the state and the union territories. Now there is the open column that is there where the respondents, they will self-report their caste that has been or that is being tested right now. At the same time, this is the first census since independence where ultimately there will be enumeration of the caste beyond the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribe. That was a decision that was approved by the cabinet in 2025 itself. Now, the final methodology, that is whether it will be open column or there will be pre-listed categories that was there in the Bihar's 2022-23 survey. So that will be decided after the complete pre-test will be taken care of, and the feedback will be given by 20th of July. So by 20th of July, it will be decided how the caste will be enumerated. Whether there will be a pre-list where ultimately you have to choose your caste, or there will be an open column where you have to prescribe or you have to tell your caste that is there. Now over here, when it comes to the SECC, that was the social economic caste census that was conducted in 2011. So there were the open method or open column method that was used, and ultimately there were about more than 46 lakh of the distinct caste names that were returned. Later on, the government had called this as unreliable data, and that is why this was not published. So over here, this complete news, it relates to the census that is conducted in India under the Census Act of 1948. And ultimately, this is the union subject where the union government, it actually conducts the census exercise after every 10 years. But it was for the only first time that the census was deferred because of the 2020. We had the COVID that was there, or COVID-19. And this is the first time that we are seeing that the census was deferred by 7 years. So now we have the census 2027 that is being conducted, and there will be phase 2. The phase 1 is about the house listing, and the phase 2 is about the enumeration that will be conducted in the states. Also, it is very important to note over here that we had the socio-economic caste census that was conducted in 2011. Now, over here, it had attempted the broader caste data collection, but ultimately that was not released, or officially not released, because it was because of the errors that were there in the context of the caste data. Now, this also relates to the Mandal Commission that was constituted in 1980, and ultimately it gave the recommendation that the other backward classes, they should be provided with the reservation. Also, this relates to the subsequent OBC reservation policy, which has long operated. But at the same time, there was no updated All India caste data set, and the last of the caste census that was conducted, or the full caste census, that was in 1931. Now, this complete article, it connects to Article 340, that provides us with the backward classes commission. Then there is the reservation policy that was provided by the Supreme Court by the Indira Sawhney case. There is the 50% ceiling debate as well, and also this relates to the cooperative federalism, where we have the state level caste surveys like Bihar, which had been conducted already. Now, also when it comes to the complete perspective, you can see that when it comes to the caste data, so it is about the caste enumeration, which is a politically salient feature ahead of the 2027 general election cycle. So over here, the parties across the spectrum, they have demanded that ultimately there should be OBC subcategorization and the quota debates as well. So there may be, ultimately this data, it could be utilized for the political purpose as well. There's also a methodology choice, which we are talking about right now. That is whether there should be open column for the caste, or there should be the meditated list, or a list that should be provided. So there is again a political weight. Ultimately, there is a fixed list that can be seen as excluding or including the specific communities. That is a political debate that we are talking about. At the same time, it is about the accurate caste data, because when we have the accurate caste data, we can recalibrate the targeting of the welfare schemes which are there and the reservation benefits as well. This also improves the fiscal efficiency of the social sector spending, and thereby this is quite important. Now, the complete news is also very important, because when we have the caste data set, so there could be the evidence-based subcategorization of the OBC as it had been recommended by the Rohini Commission, and there could be better targeted affirmative action for these social groups. Also, there is risk of the caste consciousness that is being reinforced or hardened through the official enumeration, because this actually fuels the caste politics. So ultimately, there could be fueling of the caste politics or the consciousness that could be there in the public mass. And ultimately, this is a sociological debate that we are talking about. Also, there is ethical tension that is between the right to self-identity, where it is about the autonomy of the person in the caste census that we are talking about. And also, there is the ethical tension between the state's need for the standardized and the comparable data. Also, the data privacy and the potential misuse could be there of the caste data for the political profiling. Because ultimately, when it comes to India, so in India, the elections, they are not fought on the real matters. All right, there are lots of matters which actually decides the complete electoral outcomes, and one of them is the casteism. All right, so this is again a matter where this could be utilized politically, or the data, it could be misused by the political parties while they are, you can say they are fielding their candidates into the polling regions or the constituencies. All right, so again, this is quite important. Now we have the another, article that is in text and context, and it is about El Nino, whether it will weaken the India's economy. Now again, this is very important because IMD, or the Indian Meteorological Department, it has forecasted that there will be below normal rainfall for the July as well. All right, because ultimately we had the 40% deficit in June. So there is the potential El Nino that is there on the spectrum, and that could lead to below normal rainfall in India. Now, this is quite important because ultimately a weak monsoon threatens the three ways. Completely we have three different ways how the weak monsoon will threaten the Indian economy, because there will be lower agriculture output, there will be reduced rural income and demand because of the low output in the agriculture sector. And there will be the higher food inflation because the supply will shrink. So if we have less supply, the demand will increase, that will increase the higher food inflation as well. Now, when it comes to El Nino, so ultimately we have seen that historically they have coincided with the worst droughts which were there in 1972, in 82, in 2009 and 2015 as well. When it comes to 2009 or 10, so ultimately there was the crop GVA which had contracted by 2.5 to 3.2%. So again, there will be the shortage of the agriculture output that has or that will have a very large impact when it comes to the Indian economy. Also, another news is about the reservoir storage, where we have 166 reservoirs which are monitored by CWC or the Central Water Commission. So they are already below both the last year's level as well as the normal average for this time of the year. So we have the reservoir shortage as well, because ultimately the storage is not at the peak or at the level that it was there last year or the average as well. Now, this is very important because El Nino, when it comes to El Nino, we have discussed it so many times. So what happens in El Nino is that there is the warm phase of the ENSO or El Nino Southern Oscillation, where the temperatures which are there in the Pacific Ocean, they rises towards the eastern and the central Pacific region, and ultimately that weakens the Walker cell. And if the Walker cell is weakened or it is reversed, so that impacts the Indian agriculture, because ultimately the easterly jet stream that rises from the South China Sea, it actually gets reversed or it weakens, thereby leading to drop off. There should be high pressure that should be there in the Arabian Sea. Now, this high pressure is generated because the easterly jet stream, it actually moves downwards towards the Arabian Sea, and thereby there is low pressure that is created, and it weakens the monsoon totally. Now, when it comes to the agriculture, you have to remember over here that it contributes to nearly 20% of the total of India's GVA, but at the same time it employs 46% of the workforce and also supports nearly about 55% of the population. So ultimately, if we will have the monsoon shock, so this will outsize the welfare impact as compared to the GDP share that agriculture has. So of course, we have low GDP when it comes to the agriculture. All right, we have low GDP contribution through the agriculture, but we have lots of workforce that is, or the population that is based upon, or they are totally dependent upon the agriculture and the allied activities. And thereby, the shock will be a massive shock. Now, there is also the June bulletin of the RBI, which have flagged the monsoon risk to the growth inflation outlook. So ultimately, there will be inflation because of the monsoon, and there would be food inflation, where already we are seeing that the edible oils and the vegetables, the prices are already rising before the July or the fully failed monsoon that we will have, and it connects to the green revolution. All right, you have to map the green revolution areas or the regions which are there in India. Also, it reveals, or it actually connects to the cropping patterns. All right, there is a cropping pattern where we have the paddy as compared to the pulses or the maises. So again, this is where it connects to, and also the MSP policy and even the India's national food security. Now, again, when it comes to national food security, there is an important article that you will find where the Tamil Nadu's Chief Minister, Vijay, he have flagged the concerns about the changes in the national food security. Again, you can connect this to that particular news as well. Can India decouple GDP growth from monsoon variability? Yes, that is a very important question that it actually connects to. But at the same time, when it comes to GDP growth, so we have more of the GDP growth that comes from the services sector. All right, we have major chunk of the GDP that is actually through the services sector. So ultimately, when it comes to monsoon or the El Nino, that will impact the services sector as well. Why it will impact? Because there is another news which talks about the power shortage. All right, there will be power shortage during this period, and ultimately that may lead to, it can lead to the crunch in the services sector as well. May we see the price hike? Yes, there will be the price hike for the food as well. So ultimately it is about El Nino, because this will lead to low rainfall and wind as well. There will be high heat during this point of time, where the hydro and the wind capacity, it will drop. ultimately there will be more of the AC demand or the air conditioning demand that will increase up. So if we will have the monsoon that will fail, so it will lead to the, ultimately the failure of the wind generation and even the hydro generation capacity. And there is already 18 terawatt hour of the energy deficit that we are talking about. So this will increase the coal use and even the carbon footprint. And that is the domino effect that you will see related to the El Nino in our Indian, economy. Now over here, this is very important because over here you can connect this because poor monsoon years, they historically trigger the populist responses. So we have seen the government that actually moves ahead with the loan waivers for the farmers. Also, it is about the MSP hikes. So this has politically, this has the fiscal as well as the political or economic consequences that we will see. Also, the state governments, they face pressure over the drought relief and the irrigation fund allocation. So this also tests about the fiscal coordination between the center and the states. Then comes the economic perspective where it will direct hit the crop GVA or it will hit the rural demand, because if there will be less output of the cropping, so there will be less of the demand that will be generated from the rural areas, whether it is for the autos, for the FMCGs, and thereby there will be the food inflation. So all these three are interconnected. And ultimately that could shave nearly about 20 to 65 BPS of the GDP growth as per the Kotak mutual fund estimates that had been released. Also, there is risk to the current account deficit because there will be pressure for the fertilizer and the food imports, and even it will reduce the agri exports, where we have 12% of the India's core exports that are done through the agri exports itself. Also will raise the sugar price. Ethanol, right. At the same time, it also pertains to the social perspective where it will disproportionately affect the small and the marginal farmers which have lower resilience. Even there would be the migration that we may see or the distress sale that will rise in the drought prone district, where we have nearly 314 of the vulnerable districts, out of which it is the 111 they have the poor irrigation. So there we may see that there could be migration, there could be the distress sale risk which will increase. Also, it will impact the rural employment in the construction and the non-traded services that actually depend upon the agriculture income. Now, this has direct implication when it comes to the environmental sector, because this reflects the El Nino's growing frequency and the intensity as well. Now, this could be linked to the climate change that is happening. Also raises the questions on the climate resilient agriculture, and I have spoken about this, that when it comes to the agriculture sector, so the agriculture must align with the agroclimatic zones that we have in India. So we have total of the 15 agroclimatic zones. So again, that is again important for the environmental consequences as well. All right, there is also groundwater and the reservoirs test that compounds the long-term water security concerns in India, and that is why this is again important environmentally. Now, coming to the next piece of the article that we have in today's The Hindu, this is the editorial that we are talking about, where it is AI governance and a voice for the global south. That is about India and the India's AI governance or the AI perspective that we can see. Now, over here, it is very important that India had hosted in 2026 India AI Impact Summit. So over here, this was about the AI governance around the global south needs that was majorly, focused in this particular summit that was organized by India. Also, it was departure from the earlier summits that were conducted, which were basically about the catastrophic or the existential risk of the AI. Now, after the summit, India has repositioned towards a middle power narrative. Now, this middle power narrative is where India has aligned with the US and joined the US-led Pax Silica semiconductor initiative and adopted a pro-innovation, that is a light touch regulatory approach towards the AI. Now, the US have declared that it is its disinterest in the multilateral AI governance that actually now raises fears of the repeat of the social media pattern. Now, over here, it is about the US, which is actually, protecting the big tech interests which are there. And that is what is quite concern over here, what we can talk about. All right. So it is about, ultimately when it comes to India. So India actually positioned itself as a leader of the global south. All right, this is quite important because India actually pertains, or India actually talks about that we are the leader of the global south. But at the same time, we are moving towards the middle power narrative. So there is, or it risks the concerns about the foreign policy as well. Now, there is a two-part of the UN global dialogue that is going on AI, that is in Geneva. That will be on 6th and the 7th of July. So it is seen where India have the window to reclaim the global south leadership on the AI norms. So over here, this is quite important because this complete issue, it connects to the global AI governance summits, which actually, again, you can find the question in your prelims. All right, this could relate to the chronological order of the AI summits which were, conducted. So over here, we have the first of the AI summit that was at Bletchley Park in UK in 2023. Then it was in Seoul in 2024. Then in 2025, it was Paris. And in 2026, it was India where this was conducted. So it has evolved from the existential risk to the real world harms and the equity as well, which were actually raised in the India's AI summit that was held. Now, when it comes to the global south, remember that it is basically the political and the economic grouping of the developing countries. Now, this is contrasted with the global south, where we have the US and the European Union nations which are there in the complete governance debate, and you will find the questions related to this in your GS paper, GS2, or even in your GS paper 3 as well, when it comes to the international relations. So this is very important. When it comes to the global south, global north, these are the persistent topics which had been asked. Also, it is very important that when it comes to the middle power aspiration, actually it parallels the earlier multi-alignment foreign policy that we had. But again, this actually risks diluting the global south or south-south solidarity which had been built at the summit. Now, this actually connects to the India's IT or the data protection framework, where we have the DP Act of 2023, digital sovereignty debates, and even the historical India's non-alignment movement leadership that India had portrayed. So basically, this is very important because when it comes to, all right, Kundan, when it comes to the complete issue, you can see that there are the US big tech, which actually are, they are scraping the Indian data. All right, they have the big or the large LLM models, which are basically utilizing the data which is being provided by India and the other developing nations. Now, over here, actually, they train their foundation models. Now, foundation models are those models which had been trained on the large subset of the data, and that is why they are called as large LLMs or the large language models. Then what happens is that they sell back those models or the foundation models back to India, and thereby we have the value that is accruing abroad. And that is why it is required that India must invest into the foundational models of the AI as well, where we do not have much of the research and the development work which is going on right now. Now, India is positioning between the global south leader and the middle power, which had been aligned with the US. Now, this is actually creating a diplomatic ambiguity and the potential loss of the credibility along with the developing nation partners that we have. Also, there is the domestic land acquisition for the data center. Now, this has triggered the local protest, which shows that there is the political cost of the AI infrastructure push as well. Now, also when it comes to the economic perspective, you can see that the fundamental AI innovation, it actually remains slow in India. We are reliant on the low value assembly and not on the global frontier foundational models, which actually risk us being a trap, falling into the trap of consumer of the US tech in the future. Also, it risks of the India or the global south becoming the sites of data or the labor resource attraction, where we will have the land, the water, and the electricity that will be used for or utilized for the data centers for the big tech growth of the USA. Also, this has a social perspective because when it comes to the data center, so they have displaced the communities and triggered the protest since February 2026, which actually raises the questions about the land rights and even the consent issues as well. Now, the risk that ordinary Indian user they bear because of the AI harms, like for example, biasness, there is misinformation, or even the job displacement, that risk is without the adequate domestic regulatory protection that we have for the AI governance in India. Also, this is very important because there are the environmental concerns where we have the data centers, which are actually highly resource intensive. They require large chunk of the land, they require water and the electricity, which are basically under discussed environmental cost of the AI race that we are talking about. Also, there is a trade-off that is between the AI-driven economic growth and the sustainable resource use, which actually needs the explicit policy attention that the government it must provide. So these are the important concerns that this particular AI governance or the AI it actually raises. Now, in the next of the article, you will see that this is about the Quad's future. Now, this is a complete data point where you'll find the data that had been analyzed related to the Quad structure that we have. Now, coming to the news, it is about the US Pentagon. So, the US Pentagon, it has renamed its, Pacific Command. It was earlier called as US Indo-Pacific Command, and this had been renamed back to the US Pacific Command. Now, this was done on 16th of June 2026. So, it actually reverts the complete symbolic significance of the Pacific Command to the 2018. It was renamed, and ultimately this is again very important because when it comes to the National Defense Strategy that was released in November 2025 of the US, so it prioritizes the Western Hemisphere as compared to the Indo-Pacific, and it actually does not mention anything about Quad. So this fuels the doubts about the continued American commitment towards the Indo-Pacific region, and also the critics they flag that there are certain shortcomings when it comes to Quad. The shortcoming is that there is reluctance to explicitly name China in the Quad framework. Also, there is avoidance of 2+2 ministerial format, and there is overwhelming focus on the soft issues over the hard security. So over here it is very important that recently there had been a commitment that was proposed by the Quad members, and this is about $20 billion of the Critical Minerals Initiative. Now this could be a turning point, but at the same time this remains unfunded, and even this is only a stated target so far that had been released by the Quad. So over here you will see that the Quad or the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, this originated in 2004 after the tsunami relief operation or the cooperation that was between India, US, Japan and Australia. Now it was formalized diplomatically in 2007, but then Australia backed off. So thereby it lapsed after the Australia it backed off from the Quad, and later on this was revived in 2017. Now, since 2021, we had the first virtual leader summit that was during the COVID-19. Now, the Quad had actually expanded towards the 37 initiatives that are through the various platforms. There is the security, technology, health, and even infrastructure domains where the Quad is functioning right now. Now, when it comes to the strategic autonomy of India, actually there is very importance that when it comes to the non-alignment, so thereby India does not want to, or India is quite cautious when it comes to converting Quad into the explicit military alliance or the anti-China bloc, and that is what is holding back India as well, because there is a strategic autonomy that India wants to use for its foreign policy. Now this complete news, it actually connects to the India's Act East policy towards the Mahasagar doctrine, that is the mutual and the holistic advancement for the security across region vision and even the broader Indo-Pacific construct, where you can relate this complete article to. Now when it comes to the perspective over here, so ultimately the US political retreat from the Indo-Pacific framing, where we have the National Security Strategy 2025 or the Pentagon renaming the Pacific Command. So over here it contains or it creates the uncertainty for the India's regional balance or balancing strategy that is there. Also, the Quad's reluctance to name the China, it reflects that there are the genuine diplomatic caution that is among the smaller members which are wary of appearing anti-China in the global sphere. Now, this also is very important economically, because right now the Quad is funding, but this funding remains skewed because ultimately the funding is more towards the health and climate. With the supply chain resilience, where we have critical minerals or the semiconductors, they had been underfunded despite being the central to the security competition with the China. And that is where not just India, but all the countries, they want that there should be the that the India or the other countries, they must diversify, because the critical minerals, they are majorly controlled by China. And again, when it comes to critical minerals, that would be one of the important, piece of discussion when it comes to Prime Minister Modi, because he is on to the visit to the three nations and he is making a stop to Indonesia for the first. All right. So ultimately, with the Indonesia, we'll be discussing the alignment with the critical minerals perspective as well. Now, the proposed $20 billion critical minerals initiative, if it will be funded, it could meaningfully, diversifies the India's supply chain or the critical mineral supply chain away from the Chinese dominance that we are talking about right now. Now, this is also important environmentally, because ultimately there is health and the climate-linked initiatives that have been founded by the Quad, where we have the vaccine partnership, where the partnership related to the clean energy. So they form a significant, part of the, you can say, the framework of the Quad, if underappreciated share of its cooperative agenda as well. Also, it raises the ethical and the strategic dilemma of the free riding, where India should invest into such kind of framework where ultimately disproportionately in the grouping, if the US is signaling that there will be the retrenchment of that particular group, and that is again, it raises the ethical question as well. Now, coming to the next important news that we have, it is Congress MLA to move Supreme Court. And why this is? This is because the MP or the Madhya Pradesh, it has become the first state to reconstitute the Waqf Board under the Waqf Amendment Act of 2025, where there are two non-Muslim members or the Hindu members, they had been inducted in a 10-member board. Ultimately, over here, the Congress MLA, he have said and announced that there is intent to challenge this in the Supreme Court, as the matter is already sub judice regarding the several provisions of the 2025 Act. In September 2025, the Supreme Court did not stay the entire Act, but over here, it stayed the operation of certain contentious provisions pending the judicial scrutiny. Now, this act actually mandates that Central Waqf Council and the state Waqf boards, they must have at least two non-Muslim members, and ultimately that have sparked the criticism from the Muslim community leaders and even from the opposition as well. Now, when it comes to the Waqf, so what is Waqf? Waqf is basically an Islamic endowment of property for the religious or the charitable purposes. So this is in perpetuity, historically managed by the Muslim community trustees, which were called as mutawallis, under the Waqf laws, which actually dates to the Waqf Act of 1995. Now, there is the Waqf Amendment that was brought in 2025, which actually alters the composition and the governance rule, and this is a legislative response to concerns over the transparency of the board, over the alleged mismanagement of the Waqf properties as well. Now, basically, this is actually important because this actually mirrors broader debates on the extent to which the state can regulate the internal composition of the religious or the community institutions which are under the Article 25 or 26, where it is the, Article 25, it provides with the right to or the freedom of religion. And when it comes to Article 26, that provides for the right to manage the religious affairs to the communities itself. So again, this pertains to this broader debate that we are talking about, Article 25 and 26. That is again a very important matter when it comes to the current perspective in India. Now, over here, this relates to, or you can relate this complete news, because ultimately the move is politically framed as reform by the ruling party. But at the same time, when it comes to the minority religious opposition, or there's some community leaders, they say that this is interference in the autonomy of the minority religious autonomy that had been provided by the Constitution of India. Now, this is basically about a polarization that is around the minority institution, and that can again have implication about the security perspectives of India as well. Now, it also sets a precedent, because ultimately Madhya Pradesh is right now BJP ruled. So there may be other BJP ruled states, they may follow the steps, and that may escalate a nationwide political and legal contest over the religious and the institutional governance that we are talking about. So it is very important, because we have seen when it comes to UCC. So UCC was also implemented by the states which are ruled by the BJP, and then we have seen that was a precedent. That was a precedent. It was first passed in UK, that is in Uttarakhand, and later on the other states which had been ruled by the BJP, they have started following the wave, and ultimately we have lots of UCC bills which are right now pending into the various state assemblies. So again, there could be a precedent that may be set by the Madhya Pradesh, because the other of the BJP ruled states, they may also start pushing ahead with the Waqf board reconstitution. Now, there is also the Waqf properties, which are actually right now they are vast and often underutilized asset base. Now, the reform proponents, they actually say that the better governance oversight that could enhance the economic value and the transparency of the Waqf asset for the community welfare. Also, it raises the social cohesion questions. Now, this question is about the minority committee's confidence in the neutrality of the institutions managing their own religious endowments. Also, there is debate over the women's and the expert representation on the Waqf boards. So, the amendment board actually include the women parliamentarians as the positive inclusion dimension, and thereby there are the debate that is going on the reconstitution of the complete Waqf as well. Now, there is the ethical perspective, where it is the core ethical tension, that is where we are about the balancing the state's interest that is there in transparent and accountable governance of the large public charitable assets, which is against the religious community's right to manage their own religious institution. So this is a kind of core tension that you can see in the complete issue. And this is also the question of proportionality, where actually does mandating non-Muslim membership, it will serve a legitimate regulatory purpose, or does it cross into the impossible interference into the complete managing? So that is again a core question of the proportionality as well. Now, coming to the next news that you will find in the science and tech column, it is the FDA which have approved the WIP digestrant, and ultimately why this is important. Because US FDA, it has approved the WIP digestrant on May 1 for the ESR1 mutated, ER positive, HER2 negative advanced breast cancer. Now, this is the first PROTAC based approved therapy that is there. Now, what is PROTAC? It is basically proteolysis targeting chimera. Now, these are the molecules which actually work by tagging a harmful protein when it comes to the cell. So, cell has its own degradation machinery. So, these actually molecules, they just target the harmful protein which is there, and ultimately they do not block its activity. Like, for example, we have the conventional drug. Now, for understanding this, you have to understand that how the tumor or the cancer they develop. So, we have the cells. Actually, the cells, they die and they regenerate. Alright, so we have lots of cells which are dying in your body, and then the cells, they are regenerating themselves as well. And that is how the human body or the human cells, they function. Now, what happens is, if the regeneration, it gets uncontrolled, so that leads to the generation of a tumor, and if it is malignant, it actually turns into the cancer as well. So over here, these actually molecules, they target that there is the cell's own degradation machinery. So they actually target or they tag the harmful protein that is there, and they do not block the activity like we have for the conventional drugs, which actually blocks the regenerational capacity. So in trial, it was seen that the WIP digestrant, it actually kept the cancer under control for a median of 5 months. Alright, as compared to the 2.1 month that is with the fulvestrant, that is the standard treatment for the cancer. Now, the approval, it actually brings the PROTAC technology from the 2001 discovery of the technology to the marketed drug, and this is where we are talking about the translational research journey for a complete 2-decade period. Now, over here, the conventional small molecule drugs, they actually binds to and block the protein's active site. Now, that requires sustained presence in the body, and that is why you have to take or you have to intake the conventional small molecule drugs, so that you can keep the regeneration into control. So they only block the one function of the target protein. But when it comes to PROTACs, so PROTACs are basically bifunctional, where one end it actually binds to the disease causing protein that is there, and we have the other end which actually recruits the E3 ubiquitin ligase. Now, this marks the protein for the degradation through the cell's ubiquitin proteasome system, and that is why this is different from the conventional drugs which are there. And because the PROTACs, they act catalytically, that is, they are not consumed after one use. So therefore, they can work at the lower doses as well and potentially reach the previously undruggable protein targets. Future cancer therapy may rely more on targeted protein degradation than conventional chemotherapy, right? All right, so this is very important and ultimately this pertains to the economic scenario because when it comes to the cost, so of course the PROTAC technology, it is high cost and also the complexity is quite high for the biologics or for the PROTAC drug. Now this raises the questions on the affordability and the access as well, particularly relevant for India's generic pharma dependent healthcare system where we rely on more of the generic medicines. Also, it opens a new research and development or manufacturing frontier where the Indian pharma companies, they could enter, and given the India's existing strength that is there in the complex generics, we can transform these technology for the Indian market as well. There is also, it improves the treatment options which are provided. Now, ultimately, there are the treatment options which are for the specific or the previously hard to treat cancer subtype. So that improves, but at the same time, there is a high cost that may limit the access for the economically weaker patients until we have the generics or the biosimilars which may emerge. Now, also because of this, because of the high cost, it actually raises the ethical question about the equitable global access, where it is about the 2-decade lab to market journey, which benefits patients only where there is the affordability, there is the regulatory pathways that actually exist. And India, it must proactively plan compulsory licensing or biosimilar pathways so that we can prevent the access gap in India. So then there it is again quite important. Also, there is another news about the Vikram 1. So there is a complete, article that, the video that you will find in the video section where you can see that this is the first time that we will have a rocket that had been developed by the private, organization that will be moving ahead. And then this is for your prelims and it is related to the project 17A. Now, project 17A is basically a project where we have the stealth brigade and we will have Mahendragiri that had been inducted as the 6th indigenous project, and it makes the another major milestone where it has. Now, when it comes to the stealth brigade, they had been designed by the Navy's Warship Design Bureau and ultimately built by Mazgaon Dock Shipyards Limited in Mumbai. Also, when it comes to these advanced multi-role brigade, so it actually enhances the operational capabilities, and here it is equipped with the advanced stealth features, reduced radar signature, and also the high degree of automation. That is what this INS Mahendragiri has right now. All right, now coming to the questions that could be asked in your prelims. So we have the first question, that is, consider the following statements regarding right to vote in India. First, in the NP Ponuswamy in 1952 case, the Supreme Court held that the right to vote is a statutory right, not a fundamental right. Then, in the Association for Democratic Reforms ADR case, the voter right to know the background of the candidate was recognized as a fundamental right under Article 19(1)(a). All right. Then in People's Union for Civil Liberties 2003, the Supreme Court declared that the individual right to vote flows directly from the basic structure of the Constitution. So which of the statement given above are true? Yes, we have A, that will be the right answer because third statement is incorrect. Now moving to the next question, we have, it is about, with reference to the proteolysis targeting chimeras, that is PROTAC, consider the following. Unlike conventional inhibitors, PROTACs completely degrade their target proteins instead of merely blocking them. Then a PROTAC molecule acts as a catalyst, meaning a single molecule can destroy multiple copies of the target protein. Third, they work by recruiting E3 ligase enzymes to mark the target proteins for degradation by the cell's proteasome system. So which of the statement given above is correct? Right. We have all the statements which are true. So of course the answer is 1, 2 and 3. That is the right answer. Now the Pax Silica Strategic Agreement recently in the news is primarily associated with Global Cooperation on Oceanic Deep Sea Mining Regulation, a strategic semiconductor supply chain alliance led by Western nations, a multilateral treaty on artificial intelligence safety and ethical regulations, and an international agreement to reduce silica dust emissions in coal mines. So we know about this. The right answer is Pax Silica is basically a strategic semiconductor supply chain alliance led by the Western nation. Now, coming to the next question, consider the following statements regarding the impact of El Nino on the India's energy system. The first one is it reduces the generation capacity of both wind energy and large-scale hydropower project. Then it causes a sharp drop in solar energy generation due to the increased cloud cover over peninsula. Third, according to studies, a severe El Nino can lead to a rise in the national carbon emissions as coal-fired plants are used to offset the energy deficits. So, what will be the right answer? Here, the correct answer would be the second statement. Of course, it is incorrect because El Nino, it leads to the reduction in the monsoon. So, there would be no increased cloud cover and also there will be no sharp drop in the solar energy. So, we have first and third which are correct and the answer will be B, that is 1 and 3 only. Yes. Now, coming to the next one with reference to the FCRA, consider the following statements. First, it is administered by the Ministry of Finance to regulate all foreign investment in Indian NGOs. Second, under proposed changes, a designated authority is empowered to take over or dispose of assets created using the foreign contribution if an organization's FCRA license or registration is cancelled. Then any organization receiving foreign funds must renew its FRA registration every year. Which of the statements given above is correct? Sorry. So over here, when it comes to administration, it is administered by Ministry of Home Affairs and not by Ministry of Finance. So it is Ministry of Home Affairs which actually administers the FCRA. Then when it comes to the organizations, they have to renew the their FCRA registration not after every year but after 5 years. It will be valid for 5 years. So we have 1 and 3 which is incorrect. We have second, that is correct. So we have the answer, that is 2 only, or A. Now, consider the following pairs of the plant and animal disease with their respective targets. We have white gut disease. Again, there is a news about white gut disease in today's Hindu. So we have white gut disease that relates to shrimp aquaculture. Then we have yellow rust which relates to wheat crop, and foot and mouth disease that relates to the cattle. So which of the pairs given above are correctly matched? So which pair is right? So over here we have white gut disease, that is about the shrimp aquaculture. Then yellow rust, it is for the wheat crop. We have the foot and mouth disease that relates to the cattle. So again we have D, that is 1, 2 and 3. That will be the right answer. Now, coming to the next one with reference to the BRICS grouping, consider the following. The BRICS head of anti-drug agencies meeting was recently hosted by India for the first time in Guwahati. Then the grouping has recently expanded to include Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE and Indonesia. Then the BRICS countries collectively represents more than 40% of the world's GDP or gross domestic product. So which of the statement given above are true? So what will be the right answer here? So we have all the statements as well here that are true. So therefore the answer will be D. That will be the correct answer. And coming to the next question, that is consider the following statements regarding 1931 census of India. Now it was the last census in India to conduct a comprehensive nationwide enumeration of all castes. It was conducted under the administration of Registrar General of Independent India. Then it returned a total of over 4,000 distinct castes. So here, what will be the correct answer? It will be, it was conducted. So, of course, when it comes to it is about 1931. But the Census Act, Census Act was passed in 1948. So, ultimately, it could not be conducted under the administration of RGII. So, therefore, we have the statement 2 that is incorrect. We have 1 and 3 which are correct. So, we have option B, that is the right answer. Alright, now these are the questions that you can practice for your mains. First one is the continuing friction between the democratic status of elections as a part of basic structure and the legal status of the individual right to vote as a mere statutory privilege represents a constitutional paradox. Critically examine this statement in light of the recent Supreme Court judgments. And then we have next question, that is the transition to clean energy cannot succeed without simultaneously addressing grid level storage deficit and climate induce disruption in resource generation. In light of the projected impacts of El Nino on wind and hydropower, evaluate India's preparedness to meet its peak power demands without compromising its climate commitments. So these are the two questions that you can practice for your mains as well. Now, through our today's the Complete Hindu, you'll go through the Complete Hindu, you will analyze that there is the statutory as compared to the fundamental debate. Also, we have the mandate as compared to the autonomy debate, and even the extraction as compared to the solidarity. So these are the major stories that you will find about your GS paper 2 and GS paper 3 about where it is about the state's power it should actually rely. Also, when it comes to the El Nino, it is not just an environmental answer, because El Nino connects to the economy, it connects to the agriculture and to ethics as well. So that is what you have to remember, that ultimately this is about who bears the climate risk. Because when it comes to the El Nino, you have to also analyze that whether it should be the farmers which should bear this risk, or there should be a collective responsibility towards such kind of risk where we have lots of population that is basically involved. Also, in mains, always end with the administrative take. That is very important, where you have to have a specific and defensible position and not just a summary that you have to summarize the complete answer in the conclusion. All right. Expanded BRICS group represent approximately 37 to 40%. Yeah. And nominal GDP, the share is significantly lower. Yes, that's true. All right, so that would be all in today's session. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me over here. But at the same time, before ending the session, let me tell you that we have the GS Foundation batches. We have the Resolution P2I batch, which we are starting from today. That is on 7th of July. And ultimately, you can enroll into this batch, which is based upon the SMART model, where we get the structured classes, you get the 1:1 mentorship, you get the assessment dashboard, you get the revision and the test series as well. Now, for the discount, you can use the code that is BRS Live, and ultimately you will get the maximum discount on the platform of StudyIQ. So that would be all in today's session. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me over here on the platform of StudyIQ. I will see you in the next session. That is tomorrow at the same time. That is at 9:30 a.m. where we'll be doing the complete Hindu analysis once again for tomorrow's papers, important headlines that will be there. So that would be all. But do not forget to like the session, do share the session with your friends, and even subscribe to our channel if you have not subscribed it yet. So thank you. Bye-bye. Take care and Jai Hind. Thank you, Political Science and LOL as well. Thank you.